Chapter 24 of Pollyanna Grows Up. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mary Anderson. Pollyanna Grows Up by Eleanor H. Porter. Chapter 24. Jimmy Wakes Up. Outwardly, the camping trip was pronounced a great success, but inwardly, Pollyanna wondered sometimes if it were all herself, or if there really were a peculiar, indefinable constraint in everybody with everybody else. Certainly she felt it, and she thought she saw evidences that the others felt it too. As for the cause of it all, unhesitatingly she attributed it to the last day at camp with its unfortunate trip to the Basin. To be sure, she and Jimmy had easily caught up with Jamie and had, after considerable coaxing, persuaded him to turn around and go on to the Basin with them. But in spite of everybody's very evident efforts to act as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened, nobody really succeeded in doing so. Pollyanna, Jamie, and Jimmy overdid their gaiety a bit, perhaps, and the others, while not knowing exactly what had happened, very evidently felt that something was not quite right, though they plainly tried to hide the fact that they did feel so. Naturally, in this state of affairs, restful happiness was out of the question. Even the anticipated fish dinner was flavorless, and early in the afternoon the start was made back to the camp. Once home again, Pollyanna had hoped that the unhappy episode of the angry bull would be forgotten. But she could not forget it. So in all fairness, she could not blame the others if they could not. Always she thought of it now when she looked at Jamie. She saw again the agony on his face, the crimson stain on the palms of his hands. Her heart ached for him, and because it did so ache, his mere presence had come to be a pain to her. Remorsefully, she confessed to herself that she did not like to be with Jamie now, nor to talk with him. But that did not mean that she was not often with him. She was with him, indeed, much oftener than before, for so remorseful was she, and so fearful was she that he would detect her unhappy frame of mind, that she lost no opportunity of responding to his overtures of comradeship. And sometimes she deliberately sought him out. This last she did not often have to do, however, for more and more frequently these days Jamie seemed to be turning to her for companionship. The reason for this, Pollyanna believed, was to be found in this same incident of the bull and the rescue. Not that Jamie ever referred to it directly. He never did that. He was, too, even gayer than usual. But Pollyanna thought she detected sometimes a bitterness underneath it all that was never there before. Certainly she could not help seeing that at times he seemed almost to want to avoid the others, and that he actually sighed, as if with relief, when he found himself alone with her. She thought she knew why this was so, after he said to her, as he did one day while they were watching the others play tennis, "You see, after all, Pollyanna, there isn't anyone who can quite understand as you can." Understand? Pollyanna had not known what he meant at first. They had been watching the players for 5 minutes without a word between them. Yes, for you, once, couldn't walk yourself. "Oh, yes, I know," faltered Pollyanna. And she knew that her great distress must have shown in her face, for so quickly and so blithely did he change the subject after laughing. "Come on, Pollyanna, why don't you tell me to play the game? I would if I were in your place. Forget it, please. I was a brute to make you look like that." And Pollyanna smiled and said, "No, no, no, indeed." But she did not forget it. She could not. And it all made her only the more anxious to be with Jamie and help him all she could. As if now I'd ever let him see that I was ever anything but glad when he was with me, she thought fervently, as she hurried forward a minute later to take her turn in the game. Pollyanna, however, was not the only one in the party who felt a new awkwardness and constraint. Jimmy Pendleton felt it, though he, too, tried not to show it. Jimmy was not happy these days. From a carefree youth whose visions were of wonderful spans across hitherto unbridgeable chasms, he has come to be an anxious-eyed young man whose visions were of a feared rival bearing away the girl he loved. Jimmy knew very well now that he was in love with Pollyanna. He suspected that he had been in love with her for some time. He stood aghast, indeed, to find himself so shaken and powerless before this thing that had come to him. He knew that even his beloved bridges were as nothing when weighed against the smile in a girl's eyes and the word on a girl's lips. He realized that the most wonderful span in the world to him would not be the thing that could help him to cross the chasm of fear and doubt that he felt lay between him and Pollyanna. Doubt because of Pollyanna, fear because of Jamie. Not until he had seen Pollyanna in jeopardy that day in the pasture had he realized how empty would be the world, his world, without her. Not until his wild dash for safety with Pollyanna in his arms had he realized how precious she was to him. For a moment, indeed, with his arms about her and hers clinging about his neck, he had felt that she was indeed his. And even in that supreme moment of danger, he knew the thrill of supreme bliss. Then, a little later, he had seen Jamie's face and Jamie's hands. To him they could mean but one thing. Jamie, too, loved Pollyanna, and Jamie had to stand by helpless, tied to two sticks. That was what he had said. Jimmy believed that. Had he himself been obliged to stand by helpless, tied to two sticks, while another rescued the girl that he loved, he would have looked like that. Jimmy had gone back to camp that day with his thoughts in a turmoil of fear and rebellion. He wondered if Pollyanna cared for Jamie. That was where the fear came in. But even if she did care a little, must he stand aside weakly and let Jamie, without a struggle, make her learn to care more? That was where the rebellion came in. Indeed, no, he would not do it, decided Jimmy. It should be a fair fight between them. Then, all by himself as he was, Jimmy flushed hot to the roots of his hair. Would it be a fair fight? Could any fight between him and Jamie be a fair fight? Jimmy felt suddenly as he had felt years before when, as a lad, he had challenged a new boy to a fight for an apple they both claimed. Then, at the first blow, had discovered that the new boy had a crippled arm. He had purposely lost then, of course, and had let the crippled boy win. But he told himself fiercely now that this case was different. It was no apple that was at stake. It was his life's happiness. It might even be Pollyanna's life's happiness, too. Perhaps she did not care for Jamie at all, but would care for her old friend Jimmy, if he but once showed her he wanted her to care. And he would show her. He would. Once again Jimmy blushed hotly, but he frowned, too, angrily. If only he could forget how Jamie had looked when he had uttered that moaning, "Tied to two sticks!" If only. But what was the use? It was not a fair fight, and he knew it. He knew, too, right there and then, that his decision would be just what it afterwards proved to be. He would watch and wait. He would give Jamie his chance, and if Pollyanna showed that she cared, he would take himself off and away quite out of their lives, and they should never know, either of them, how bitterly he was suffering. He would go back to his bridges, as if any bridge, though it led to the moon itself, could compare for a moment with Pollyanna. But he would do it. He must do it. It was all very fine and heroic,